Have you ever looked a bully in the eye, knowing they held your entire livelihood in their manicured hands? What happens when a spoiled billionaire's heiress publicly destroys a struggling waitress, only to uncover a buried family secret that completely shatters her perfect world? Listen closely. This changes everything. The air inside Laura, Manhattan's most unapologetically exclusive fine dining establishment, always smelled faintly of white truffles, expensive beeswax, and old money. For 24-year-old Chloe Jackson, it smelled like survival. Chloe adjusted the stiff, suffocating collar of her starch-white uniform and balanced a silver tray loaded with crystal champagne flutes on her fingertips. Her feet throbbed in her regulation black heels, a dull, rhythmic ache that matched the pounding in her head. She had slept a total of 3 hours the night before, spending the rest of the time sitting in a sterile hospital room, holding her mother's fragile hand. The eviction notice taped to their apartment door that morning had been the final, crushing weight on her shoulders. She needed this shift. She needed the tips. She needed to be utterly invisible and flawlessly perfect. Then, the heavy mahogany doors at the front of the restaurant swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victoria Harrington did not walk into rooms. She held court in them. As the only daughter of real estate titan Arthur Harrington, Victoria was a tabloid fixture, known equally for her striking, icy beauty and her legendary temper. She swept in, wearing a custom emerald silk gown that easily cost more than Chloe's annual salary, flanked by her usual entourage: Penelope Brooks, a textile heiress with a penchant for cruelty, and Wyatt Hayes, a trust fund playboy who treated the world like his personal playground. Monsieur Laurent, the usually unflappable general manager of Laura, practically materialized out of thin air, bowing so low his nose nearly brushed the Italian marble floor. "Miss Harrington, an absolute honor. Your usual table in the alcove is prepared," Laurent fawned, his voice dripping with sycophantic sweetness. "It better be," Victoria replied, not even looking at him. She didn't hand her white mink coat to the coat-check girl. She simply let it drop off her shoulders, fully expecting someone to catch it before it hit the floor. Someone did. Chloe was assigned to the alcove. It was the most coveted section, usually reserved for the most generous tippers, but serving the Harrington party was a notoriously dangerous game. One wrong move, one lukewarm soup, and a server could be blacklisted from the Manhattan dining scene forever. Approaching the table, Chloe pasted on her most professional, deferential smile. "Good evening. Welcome to Laura. May I start you off with some sparkling water, or perhaps a vintage selection from our cellar?" Victoria finally turned her gaze toward Chloe. Her eyes were a pale, piercing blue, and they swept over Chloe's uniform, her tired face, and her fraying name tag with undisguised contempt. "Water," Victoria commanded, her tone bored. "And make sure it's actually cold this time. Last week, the girl brought me tap water that tasted like it came out of a radiator. Are you going to be competent, or do I need to ask Laurent for someone who actually possesses a working brain?" Chloe's jaw tightened, but her smile remained rigidly in place. "Ice water. Right away, Miss Harrington." For the next hour, the alcove table was a battleground. Victoria sent back her seared scallops because they were too symmetrical. She demanded a specific, unlisted vintage of Pinot Noir, and when Chloe managed to procure it from the depths of the cellar, Penelope complained that the crystal glass had a smudge that was clearly from Penelope's own heavy lipstick. Chloe swallowed her pride with every trip to the kitchen. "Think of the hospital bills," she repeated in her mind like a mantra. "Think of Mum's medication. Just get through the night." The disaster happened during the main course. Chloe was navigating the narrow space between the velvet booths, carrying a heavy tray bearing 3 plates of duck confit and a freshly decanted bottle of an incredibly rare, blood-red Bordeaux. As she stepped toward the table, Wyatt Hayes leaned back violently in his chair, throwing his arms out to emphasize a loud joke he was telling. His elbow slammed squarely into the center of Chloe's tray. Physics took over. The tray tipped, the plates slid, and the heavy crystal decanter launched forward like a missile, emptying its deep crimson contents directly onto the bodice of Victoria Harrington's emerald silk gown. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the dining room. The ambient hum of wealthy chatter instantly died. Victoria stood up, her chair screeching horribly against the marble floor. The dark wine dripped from her chest, staining the silk, an ugly, bruised purple, pooling onto her designer heels. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, horror seizing her throat. "Miss Harrington, I am so terribly sorry. He backed into my tray. I didn't—" "Shut up!" Victoria screamed, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceilings. She grabbed a cloth napkin and dabbed frantically at the ruined silk, but the stain was already set. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She turned her blazing eyes onto Chloe. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Victoria hissed, stepping closer. "This is a bespoke Givenchy gown. It's worth $30,000. That is more money than your entire pathetic, worthless life will ever generate." "Miss Harrington, it was an accident, I swear. Mr. Hayes bumped into—" "I said shut your mouth!" Victoria sneered, her voice trembling with venom. She looked Chloe up and down, her lip curling in disgust. "Look at you. You're nothing. You're a clumsy, uneducated peasant serving food to people who actually matter. You think because you put on a little white shirt and stand in a nice room that you belong here. You are trash. You will always be trash. And I am going to make sure you never work in this city again." Tears pricked the corners of Chloe's eyes, burning hot with humiliation. Dozens of eyes were locked onto her. Nobody intervened. Wyatt was snickering behind his hand. Penelope was recording the aftermath on her phone. Monsieur Laurent materialized, his face pale with panic. "Miss Harrington, 1,000 apologies. I will have the dry cleaning bill sent directly to my personal account. This is unacceptable." "Dry cleaning?" Victoria laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "This dress is ruined, Laurent. And if you don't fire this incompetent bitch right this second, my father will buy this restaurant tomorrow just to bulldoze it to the ground." Laurent didn't even hesitate. He turned to Chloe, his expression devoid of any empathy. "Chloe, give me your apron. You are terminated immediately. Leave through the service exit." Chloe stood frozen. The sheer injustice of it paralyzed her. "But Monsieur Laurent, he hit my tray. It wasn't my fault. You know my situation. I need this job to pay for my mother's—" "Get out!" Victoria snapped, "before I call the police and have you arrested for destruction of property." With her hands shaking uncontrollably, Chloe reached behind her back, untied the strings of her apron, and let it fall to the floor. She didn't look at Victoria. She didn't look at the manager. She kept her eyes on the spilled wine, turned on her heel, and walked toward the kitchen doors, leaving her dignity, her livelihood, and her mother's only lifeline shattered on the dining room floor. The service hallway behind the kitchen was a stark contrast to the opulence of the dining room. It was narrow, lit by harsh fluorescent tubes, and smelled heavily of bleach and raw fish. Chloe collapsed onto the wooden bench in the cramped employee locker room. She buried her face in her hands, and the dam finally broke. Sobs tore through her chest, violently shaking her small frame. It wasn't just the humiliation that burned. It was the absolute powerlessness. Victoria Harrington had swatted her away like a mosquito. $30,000 for a dress. Chloe's mother, Evelyn, needed $20,000 for the surgery that could save her life. To Victoria, that money was cloth. To Chloe, it was a heartbeat. After 10 minutes of crying, she forced herself to breathe. Panic wouldn't pay the rent. She opened her locker, pulled out her worn winter coat, and shoved her few belongings into a canvas tote bag. She had to go back to the hospital. She had to figure out a new plan. Wiping her red, swollen eyes, Chloe pushed open the heavy metal door that led to the alleyway behind the restaurant. The cold December wind bit into her cheeks instantly. As she navigated the dimly lit alley, heading toward the main street, her foot kicked something metallic. It skittered across the concrete with a sharp clink. Chloe stopped and looked down. Catching the dim light of a street lamp was a heavy, incredibly ornate gold and diamond cuff bracelet. It was thick, laden with intricate filigree, and embedded with sapphires. Chloe recognized it immediately. It had been wrapped around Victoria Harrington's wrist as she gestured wildly earlier in the evening. She must have ripped it off in her fury while storming out, or dropped it while getting into her car. Chloe stared at the bracelet. She knew its value. A piece like this from a high-end jeweler could easily fetch $50,000 at a discreet pawn shop. It was the surgery. It was the rent. It was revenge. Victoria had stolen her livelihood. Wasn't it poetic justice to take this in return? Chloe picked it up. It was heavy, solid gold. But as her fingers traced the cold stones, a sick feeling curled in her stomach. Evelyn Jackson hadn't raised a thief. Even as they starved, even as Evelyn worked 3 jobs until her body gave out, she had drilled into Chloe the absolute necessity of integrity. "Our character is the only thing the rich can't buy from us, Chloe," her mother used to say. "Don't ever give it away for free." Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, cursed her own unshakable conscience, and turned back toward the front of the restaurant. She rounded the corner onto the avenue. Parked squarely in the loading zone in front of Laura was a massive, pitch-black Maybach. The driver's door was open, and standing on the sidewalk, illuminated by the warm glow of the restaurant's exterior sconces, was Arthur Harrington. Even in his late 50s, the billionaire was an imposing figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal overcoat, he radiated an authority that made people instinctively step out of his way. He was speaking in hushed, tense tones to Victoria, who was bundled in her white mink, arms crossed, looking infuriated. "Utterly unacceptable behavior, Victoria," Arthur was saying, his deep voice carrying on the night air. "You do not cause a scene in public. We have a reputation to maintain." "She ruined my dress, Dad," Victoria shot back, sounding remarkably like a petulant child rather than a 24-year-old heiress. "She was a clumsy idiot. I handled it." "You threw a tantrum," Arthur corrected sharply. Chloe swallowed the lump of fear in her throat. She gripped the gold cuff in her hand and stepped into the light. "Excuse me," Chloe said. Her voice was slightly raspy from crying, but steady. Arthur and Victoria both turned. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed into absolute fury. What are you doing here? Are you stalking me? I told Laurent to throw you out." Arthur held up a single commanding hand, silencing his daughter instantly. He looked at Chloe, his sharp grey eyes analyzing her from her scuffed shoes to her tear-stained face. "Can I help you, young lady?" Chloe ignored Victoria entirely, focusing on the older man. She stepped forward and extended her hand, opening her palm to reveal the glittering bracelet. "Miss Harrington dropped this in the alleyway by the service exit," Chloe said, her tone deadpan and professional. "I thought she would want it back. It looks expensive." Victoria snatched the bracelet from Chloe's palm without a word of thanks, quickly inspecting it for damage. Arthur Harrington, however, did not look at the jewelry. He was staring at Chloe's face. As he stepped closer, the light from the sconce hit Chloe directly. She had distinct features, striking, deep-set, hazel eyes, a smattering of freckles across the bridge of her nose, and a sharp, elegant jawline that she inherited directly from her mother. Arthur's breath caught visibly in his chest. The commanding, powerful aura surrounding him seemed to fracture in a split second. The colour completely drained from his face, leaving him looking ashen and suddenly very old. "Where?" Arthur started, his voice suddenly faltering. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, but his eyes were locked onto Chloe with an intensity that made her want to step backward. "What is your name?" "Don't talk to her, Dad. She's a nobody," Victoria scoffed, sliding the bracelet onto her wrist. "Let's just go." "I asked you a question," Arthur said, ignoring his daughter, his voice dropping to an urgent, rough whisper. "Your name, what is it?" "Chloe," she replied, unnerved by the billionaire's sudden, intense scrutiny. "Chloe Jackson." Arthur staggered backward a half step, as if she had physically struck him in the chest. He reached out and braced his hand against the sleek hood of the Maybach to steady himself. "Jackson." Arthur breathed out the word like a prayer or a curse. "Evelyn, is your mother Evelyn Jackson?" Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs. The cold night air seemed to evaporate. How on earth did Arthur Harrington, a man who owned half the Manhattan skyline, know the name of her mother, a broke, dying woman living in a crumbling walk-up in Queens? "Yes," Chloe answered cautiously, her defensive instincts flaring. "My mother is Evelyn." "How do you know her?" Victoria let out a short, confused laugh. "Dad? What are you talking about? Who is Evelyn?" Arthur slowly stood up straight, his chest heaving as he stared at the young waitress standing before him. The arrogant billionaire was gone, replaced by a man looking at a ghost. He looked at Chloe's threadbare coat, her exhausted eyes, and the sheer desperation clinging to her. "My God," Arthur whispered, a profound, agonizing sorrow twisting his features. He took a hesitant step toward Chloe. "She promised me she took you far away. She promised me you were safe." "Safe from what?" Chloe demanded, her voice rising in panic. "Mr. Harrington, how do you know my mother?" Arthur turned to his driver, who had been standing silently by the car door. "Cancel all my meetings for tomorrow," Arthur commanded, his voice trembling slightly. He looked back at Chloe. "Where is Evelyn now? I need to see her." "You can't," Chloe said, her voice cracking as the reality of her mother's situation crashed back over her. "She's in Mount Sinai Hospital. She's very sick." Arthur closed his eyes, a look of profound devastation washing over him. When he opened them, he looked at his daughter, Victoria, who was watching the exchange with growing alarm and confusion. Then he looked back at Chloe. "Get in the car, Chloe," Arthur said gently, stepping aside to open the heavy rear door of the Maybach himself. "What?" Victoria shrieked. "Dad, are you insane? You're letting the waitress who ruined my dress into our car? Why do you know her mother? What is going on?" Arthur turned to Victoria, his face hardening into an expression of sheer resolve. "Get in the car, Victoria. It's time you learned exactly whose life you've been living all these years." The interior of the Maybach was a masterclass in suffocating silence. The soundproof cabin muted the chaotic hum of Manhattan traffic, leaving only the soft purr of the engine and the tense, erratic breathing of its 3 passengers. Chloe sat stiffly against the hand-stitched leather upholstery, feeling entirely out of place in her cheap, scuffed shoes and threadbare coat. Across from her, Victoria practically vibrated with rage, her perfectly manicured fingernails aggressively tapping the screen of her phone, undoubtedly venting to Penelope and Wyatt. Beside Victoria, Arthur Harrington sat perfectly still. He stared out the tinted window at the passing city lights, his reflection revealing a man completely hollowed out by a ghost from his past. When the massive car pulled up to the emergency entrance of Mount Sinai Hospital, Arthur didn't wait for his driver. He threw open his own door and stepped out into the freezing air. "Take us to her," Arthur commanded, looking at Chloe. Victoria scoffed, refusing to move from her seat. "I'm not going into a public hospital, Dad. It smells like bleach and poor people." "Have Charles drive me back to the penthouse?" Arthur stopped and turned back to the open door. His eyes, usually cool and calculating, were ablaze with a terrifying authority. "You will get out of this car, Victoria, and you will follow us. You are going to witness the consequences of arrogance. Move." Victoria flinched. She had never heard her father use that tone with her. Grabbing her white mink coat, she stepped onto the pavement, her face twisted in a petulant scowl. Chloe led the way through the sliding glass doors, bypassing the crowded waiting room. She guided them to the elevator banks, pressing the button for the fourth-floor intensive care unit. The contrast between the billionaire and his daughter, draped in designer luxury, and the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the public hospital was jarring. Nurses and orderlies turned to stare as they passed. "Room 412, Chloe whispered, her heart heavy as they approached the door. Arthur placed a trembling hand on the doorknob. He pushed it open slowly. The room was dim, illuminated only by the glow of the heart monitor and the streetlights filtering through the blinds. Lying in the center of the bed was Evelyn Jackson. She was a fraction of the vibrant woman she had once been, her skin pale and translucent, tubes running from her arms to various machines. Yet, beneath the exhaustion and illness, the striking bone structure she had passed down to Chloe remained undeniable. Arthur stepped into the room as if walking on holy ground. He approached the bed, falling to his knees on the linoleum floor. "Eve!" he choked out, the word carrying a quarter-century of grief. Evelyn slowly opened her eyes. The heavy medication made her blink sluggishly, but as her vision cleared and locked onto the man kneeling beside her bed, her monitor spiked with a rapid beep. "Arthur?" Her voice was a fragile, papery whisper. She tried to pull her hand away, panic flashing in her hazel eyes. "How did you—" "You shouldn't be here. He'll find out. He'll hurt her." "He's dead, Eve," Arthur said, tears finally breaking free and tracking down his weathered cheeks. He gently grasped her frail hand in both of his. "My father died 10 years ago. William can't hurt you anymore. He can't hurt anyone." Chloe stood frozen in the doorway, her mind spinning. "Mom! What is he talking about?" Evelyn's gaze shifted to her daughter, and then, slowly, to the furious, confused girl in the white fur coat standing behind her. A profound sadness settled over Evelyn's face. "It's time, Arthur," Evelyn whispered, coughing weakly. "She's a grown woman now." "They both are." Arthur stood up, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, stripping away the billionaire facade to reveal the broken man underneath. He turned to face Chloe and Victoria. 25 years ago, before the empire, before I was the man I am today, I was a junior associate at my father's firm, Arthur began, his voice thick with emotion. And I fell in love with a brilliant, beautiful legal secretary named Evelyn. We were going to run away together. We were going to get married. "Dad, stop," Victoria interrupted, crossing her arms defensively. "You were married to my mother, Beatrice." "I was forced to marry Beatrice to secure a merger," Arthur corrected harshly. "It was an arrangement orchestrated by my father, William Harrington. When he found out about Evelyn, he didn't just fire her. He threatened to destroy her family. He hired fixers to run her father's small business into bankruptcy. He promised he would have her completely erased if she didn't disappear. And when he found out she was pregnant, Arthur's voice cracked. He told her that if she ever contacted me, the child would be taken away. Chloe felt the floor drop out from beneath her. The hospital room seemed to spin. "Pregnant," she whispered. "I looked for you for a decade, Eve," Arthur said, turning back to the bed. "I hired private investigators, but you changed your name. You vanished." "I had to, Arthur," Evelyn breathed, tears pooling in her eyes. "To protect our daughter." "Our daughter," Victoria repeated, the words tasting like acid on her tongue. She let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. "Are you telling me this? This waitress is your bastard child? Is that what this is? Some heartwarming reunion with a gold-digging mistake? Do not speak about your sister that way," Arthur roared, the sound echoing off the sterile walls. "She is not my sister," Victoria shrieked. "I am a Harrington. I am the heir to your legacy. She is nothing." Arthur looked at Victoria, his expression hardening into cold, devastating steel. The sorrow was gone, replaced by a ruthless clarity. "You are right about one thing, Victoria. You are not her sister," Arthur said slowly, letting every word land with brutal precision, "because you do not have a drop of Harrington blood in your veins." Silence crashed into the room, heavier than concrete. Even the heart monitor seemed to quiet down. Victoria's jaw dropped. "What?" "Beatrice and I were never intimate after the first year of our marriage," Arthur revealed, his voice devoid of any warmth. "She had an affair with a British equestrian, Lord Reginald Ashford. When she discovered she was pregnant, my father forced us to maintain the illusion to avoid a public scandal that would tank the company's stock. I raised you. I gave you my name, my wealth, and my protection. But biologically, Victoria, you are an Ashford. Chloe is my only blood heir." Victoria staggered backward, hitting the heavy wooden door of the hospital room. Her face drained of all color, the arrogant sneer completely vanishing, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. Her entire identity, her superiority, her justification for treating the world like dirt was built on a lie. "No," Victoria gasped, shaking her head frantically. "No, you're lying. You're just trying to punish me for the dress. I'll call our lawyers." "Call them," Arthur challenged, pulling his sleek black phone from his pocket. "Call Marcus in legal. Ask him about the sealed DNA test from 24 years ago locked in my personal vault. I kept the secret because I loved the daughter I raised. But watching you tonight, watching you humiliate a hard-working girl, treating her like trash over a spilled drink, I realized the Harrington money has poisoned you. And I will not let it poison the only piece of my true family I have left." Arthur turned to Chloe, who was leaning against the wall for support, weeping silently as she processed the magnitude of the revelation. The man who owned half the city was her father. The woman who had tormented her hours ago was living the life that was stolen from her. "Chloe," Arthur said gently, stepping toward her with open arms. "I cannot rewrite the past. I cannot take away the suffering my father caused your mother. But I swear to you, on my life, you will never struggle again." He turned his head toward the door, where his security detail had silently gathered in the hallway. "Get Dr. Harrison Croft on the phone right now," Arthur ordered. "Tell him I am moving a VIP patient to his private wing at Columbia Presbyterian. I want the finest cardiology team in the country, scrubbed in and ready by sunrise. Money is no object." Over the next few weeks, the world as Chloe knew it shifted on its axis. Evelyn was transported via a private medical helicopter to a state-of-the-art suite. Under the care of the nation's top surgeons, She received the life-saving heart procedure she desperately needed, fully funded by the Harrington estate. When she finally opened her eyes in recovery, Arthur was sitting in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand, having refused to leave her side. As for Victoria, the reality check was absolute. Arthur did not disown her. He wasn't a monster, but the endless flow of cash was severed immediately. Her platinum credit cards were cancelled, her trust fund was frozen. She was moved out of the $50 million penthouse and into a modest two-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Arthur gave her an ultimatum. Get a job and learn the value of $1, or she would be legally removed from his will forever. Ironically, her first job interview was for a hostess position at a mid-tier Italian restaurant. She didn't get it. Her attitude was too poor. Chloe, however, stepped into her new reality with the grace and humility her mother had instilled in her. She didn't buy sports cars or designer gowns. Instead, she took her place at Harrington Enterprises, bypassing the boardroom to take control of the company's philanthropic arm. Her first major initiative was establishing a massive, fully funded healthcare trust for service industry workers across New York City, ensuring that no waitress would ever have to choose between their dignity and their mother's life again. Sometimes the universe delivers justice wrapped in a spilled glass of wine, and sometimes the very people you step on are the ones who truly own the ground you walk on. Did this story of instant karma and shocking family secrets keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved watching arrogance get exactly what it deserves, hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible, dramatic, real-life stories. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you were Chloe?